Alrighty. Cool. Anyway, hello all the people who aren't watching. Here we are doing some more world building stuff. So, this is going to be half and half, a bit of a test stream just to make sure some kind of behind the scenes stuff I've been doing is working out okay, but looks like I still have a few things to tweak here and there. But hey, I'm still within like 2 weeks of streaming on this account, so we'll kind of get things to where we want them to be in time. One of the things I'm looking into doing is setting up my personal Discord to be more of a community Discord. We've already got about 100 people in there, just about, and it's pretty much active every day, surprisingly, but yeah, so I'll look into a way to kind of get that linked up with the Twitch at some stage. And aside from that, I've got I'm also thinking of utilizing some AI tools to basically help with a envisionment of some of the stuff we're working on in terms of environment and whatnot, but I'm hoping to get those set up. If not tomorrow or the day after, then the day after that, if I can. But yeah, you might notice I've also got a somewhat of a stream schedule on there right now too. And that we are also streaming outside of the current stream schedule. So basically that stream schedule is mostly like days I'm going to try to guarantee that I can stream on. Although, with that said, it's worth noting that the day after next, in this time slot, I'm not going to be, or a bit earlier than this time slot rather, I'm not going to be able to do, and then 2 weeks from now, tomorrow, I'm not going to be able to do either, but outside of that, we should be fine for a solid while. So with that said, I'm kind of just gonna poke around here and there today, and we're kind of just gonna see what happens. So one of the things we did last time down in this central continent here, as we kind of just organized a bit more of everything we kind of wanted here, and why, and we were kind of working on some of this expansion down below of how we're going to utilize like devils and archangels and demons and kind of angelic beings, and I think we've got a roughly pretty good idea there. So the devils themselves, we were kind of stating 7 devil princes represent 7 deadly sins and have the 7 circles of hell. Each represent some form of quote-unquote demonic race. So what we're going to do now is just list these 7 sins. And we're going to see what we can kind of make work with them. So the last one is greed. So, one of the things I want to kind of start doing is just looking up some kind of demonic kind of races and think about which ones might fit each of these sins. So we know for sure lust is going to be succubi and incubi. But the other ones more so are going to be a little more difficult. So let's do a little bit of research on what devils/demons represent the sin of greed, for instance. And we're just gonna do that for each of the sins, and we're kind of gonna see what results we get. I imagine envy most notoriously could be some kind of like shape-shifting demon or something, and that can kind of come a bit into play as to like how there are doppelgangers or mimics or anything else kind of out there in the world. Outside of that, I'm not really sure off the top of my head like what other kind of demons or devils, like in terms of like a race rather than a particular character, might represent anything else. So we're going to look at envy, we're going to look at greed, we're going to look at wrath and pride as well. And it's worth noting with Leviathan in particular. Leviathan is not only represented as like a demon prince, but also as like the sin of envy, but also as like a giant sea serpent. So kind of what I'm imagining a bit there is maybe we will probably take some inspiration of the kind of 7 devil princes as to like what kind of race we could imagine them as, and basically envision some form of like race stemming from them. In Leviathan's case, what we could do with that and envy is we can actually have them be like serpents, but maybe like the serpents that come from them basically like shed their skins, and that's kind of like that shedding of the skin process is how they like change form, maybe, essentially. Now I also need to look up sloth, and after sloth we also have gluttony, and I think that'll be the final one I kind of need to use as reference here for now. Let's see. But yeah, no, I am still looking into getting the webcam set up when I can as well. Technically, I could like just put it on right now if I wanted to, but I kind of want to finish setting everything else up first before I kind of like start plastering my face everywhere. Right, and gluttony's the final one. Cool, so I'm just finished loading up all my resources in the background. So now let's start reviewing some of this information. So what devils or demons represent the sin of greed? So we obviously gonna know that they're each gonna represent some devil prince as well. So greed, for instance, is going to be Mammon, I believe. Pride is going to be Lucifer. Wrath is technically Satan, and we can kind of play a bit on the differences between like Wrath and Pride there. Because I kind of like the idea of maybe like some kind of fallen angel or something, potentially. That sounds like it could be a lot of fun. But yes, so in the meantime, let's start with greed. So Mammon is often personified as the demon of greed and wealth. Let's see. That's generally regarded as the 4th circle. So we'll kind of like take note of the circles as we go along as well. So Belphegor and Beelzebub are also associated with some of these. Beelzebub being the one for gluttony, and imagining some kind of Lord of the Flies situation there. What else do we have? Asmodeus is the one for lust, I believe, and I've always loved just like the name Asmodeus, that's always struck a chord with me and stuck out to me more than any of the other kind of like Devil Prince names. So I do want to do like a bit of something special with him. Let's see. But yeah, no, another interesting reference for this could also be Full Metal Alchemist, with the homunculi there representing the sins as well. I'm sure that's probably something that everyone... Well, if you're watching me, you've probably heard of Full Metal Alchemist, even if you haven't watched it. So, spirits and deities who embody greed, but not necessarily demons. Okay, I'm not really getting any hits based on how I search for actual races of demons, so I might reword that phrasing a bit. But at the same time, I'll keep kind of looking at what we've got for the other results in the meantime. We can search up some more results afterwards if we need to. So after greed, next is going to be envy. So, let's see. Leviathan being... This one is a bit interesting, so... Let's see, what else do we have? Abaddon and Apollyon. I imagine Abaddon is more like a pit fiend kind of creature. So in some medieval and Renaissance artworks and texts, Leviathan is depicted as the demon of envy. This depiction often shows Leviathan consuming others. Yeah. These are definitely the kind of wrong wording to get more of the results I wanted, but that is okay. So what devil demon races represent the sin of envy? Cool. Next up is going to be Wrath. So Wrath, of course, representing Satan, most commonly. And we definitely want to like tie these sins in with emotion somehow. Because I imagine that's kind of like how we want the powers to tie in. Cool. Alrighty. Baphomet seems to be linked to a lot of stuff, interestingly, as well. Okay, so what devil/demon races represent the sin of Wrath? Okay, no, I did get a result in Wrath actually. So Wrath was a Japanese spirit, prideful spirits in various cultures. So, or Wrath, or rather. So we have some Japanese traditions of revengeful spirits called Onryo that return to exact wrathful revenge on those who wrong them. Okay, I'm imagining some kind of, Wrath could be some kind of revenant or something. The concern about that is it could overlap with undead somewhat. So we kind of tied in a bit that, like, by the devils making these contracts, basically they take the souls from these bodies and the bodies are kind of like left behind. So maybe left behind bodies from devil contracts become unique forms of undead. Because I could imagine like Revenants being perfect for that. Cool. So next up we have the classic Lucifer. That sounds about right. Emperor of the Circles of Hell, so he'll probably end up being like the 7th circle, most likely, in this case. And I know Satan and Beelzebub are also like considered like the big three between these demons, so I'll kind of take the look to see like where we want to place second or third or whatnot. Now, what else do we have? Okay, so I'm also going to look up the races for Sloth, but I imagine Sloth could maybe be more so like a very large, slow, powerful demon that doesn't really want to do anything, basically. Similar to like the pit things we mentioned earlier, but those could also be like gluttony, potentially. So Sloth, what else do we have? That is going to be Belphegor. That's the one I was forgetting earlier. Now, Belphegor. Ingenious inventions that will make them rich and lazy. Okay, we could do something interesting in terms of like innovation and inventions there, because we do have like a kind of steampunk area that we want to do something with at some stage. Okay, and Sloth is the 4th circle of the Hells. Okay, but apparently that's kind of the same as Greed according to this resource, so I'll kind of verify that a bit later on. But yeah, Belphegor seems to be like the overwhelming #1 for Sloth. Alternatively, we could also literally do like the sloth animal as a demon, because that sounds like it would be kind of funny, I'm not gonna lie. But they're like bigger and stronger, like bloody slacking. And finally, Gluttony. Beelzebub, of course. Lord of the Flies, as he's known. Some kind of insectoid race. Okay, and this one looks like it might be the 3rd circle. Okay, cool. Let's see. And of course, gluttonous spirits, those are as they are. Alright. Now, I'll look up the rest of my results, which are kind of more so for specifying races, and we'll see what they say. So what devil/demon races represent the sin of Gluttony. Right, and as that's kind of all loading, let's take a look at races in particular. Do we get any different results for this? No, it still seems to be particular devils more than anything. So I guess what we can do is kind of come up with a few of our own ideas, but I'm also going to look up what devil princes / shins rule over which circles of hell. And we'll use that as a rough guide to kind of like power scale our devils a little bit, or how dangerous we want what parts to be where. So the first circle being limbo, there's no real ruler over it or whatnot. The second one is lust, so that's like the first kind of circle, so that'll be Asmodeus. And that feels kind of fitting, because I feel out of all the sins, lust is definitely one of the easier ones for people to quote-unquote fall prey to. And basically, since this is the idea of this is basically to have like a bunch of succubi and incubi basically running a brothel, yeah, it fits. Cool. Now, what else do we have? Third circle is gluttony. Okay, so, yep, that's fine as it is. Fourth circle is greed. So sloth will be something else. So fifth circle is wrath, apparently. If my source is correct. The sixth circle is generally heresy. That might not be something we necessarily use in ours. Then we have wrath is next. Okay, it looks like there isn't really a placement for envy. Let me check this again. So which circle would envy represent? Okay, so it's not part of the Inferno, it's somewhere else. Okay, that's fine. Now, in that case, what I might do in the short term is just treat it as the sixth circle, just because that's the only real gap we have, and it kind of makes sense to put the odd one out in the single gap we have. Cool, that's fine. Now, so, yeah, let's look at these races a bit more. So we've got fallen angels, we've got some kind of fly devils. I imagine some kind of like sloth monsters. Just because it feels fitting. Okay, Raph will have to think a little bit about. We've got like succubi and incubi. Now, I'm imagining some kind of skinwalkers for this. And greed we also kind of need to think on a little. So let's look at what races of demon and devil are most famous. Let's say species instead of races, that might get us better results. So, for example, succubus, incubus, and imps. Imps are a big one. Or a little one, rather. But yeah, keep in mind we need to use some of these, like the 72 lesser demons as well. And it's just kind of giving me names of notable demons and whatnot again, rather than races, which is unfortunate. So what we might do, just take down imps as a node, and I think we might start looking up elsewhere list of demonic races. Okay, and let's see what we kind of come up here. So theological demons is a very big list. I'm just going to go down to... Yeah, so it looks like this includes like imps and incubi and whatnot, so this could be a good list for us. Let's start with A. So, there are of course going to be like the massive named demons, but I'm also looking for the demon races which might stick out to me. And we kind of want these to be the more famous ones or recognizable ones, if that makes sense. So I've heard of the Anzu before. I kind of forget what they are exactly. Let's take a quick look. So the Anzu is some kind of bird who can breathe fire and water, or a lion-headed eagle. It involves the Mesopotamian myths from Old Babylon, which is kind of fitting, because we do want this to be close to that area, but I don't know if this is really the kind of demon I have in mind. So we're thinking, again, imps, pit fiends, succubi, incubi, things like that. Now, what else do we have? So we've got the Banshee and whatnot too. That's more of a undead than a demon in my mind. I might look up a couple other resources too. What kind of famous demon species are there? So we've got the classification of demons as well. There's also like a wider spectrum, like fiends too. So let's think on this. So, demons, fiends, devils. Hellhounds slash Cerberus. We might do something with that somewhere. Revenants we kind of got already. Okay. Let's see, what else do we have? Princes, demons, and imps. Let's see, I'm just reading a few of these background resources, so don't mind me for a moment here. So D&D has like Baelors and Novenshi. I don't know if those are necessarily like original creations. But we could use them as a reference to make our own. But yeah, I think the classification of demons reference I have here is probably going to be our best reference, potentially. But yeah, there's also the different kind of like ranking orders for some of these sins. So pride's pretty much universally always like number one. They also have like Beelzebub at 2. There's also different sins corresponding to them in different kind of sources. Okay, we can also think about familiars, witches, witchcraft. They might not necessarily be demons themselves, but we can think of some kind of correspondence with like some form of magic system with them. What else do we have here? Furies, genies to an extent. Alright. Okay. Seems like there's actually not as many classical demon races as I legitimately thought there might be. Which is pretty interesting because it means we have a lot of room to be pretty creative in terms of creating our own. Just finishing, getting to the end of this little resource here to make sure there isn't much else that I kind of want to utilize. You can also look up some archdemons. We'll just use it for like general terminology for now. That could tie into play pretty well with the Archangel opposition, which we'll get to at some point. Okay, cool. So, just going to take another quick note here to remind us that devils represent evil and demons represent chaos. Basically, the issue right now is that if we do have like such a limited resource to refer to in terms of like creating these demonic races, that itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm just kind of curious how I'm going to rank it in correlation to like some kind of equivalent with the archangels, because when you figure out the difference between like angels and demons or devils in particular, generally you always have an idea of angels themselves generally always kind of have the same kind of impression, I feel, unless you're thinking of like biblically accurate angels, but just kind of like the humanoids with the white fluffy wings. And while I do kind of like having the angels themselves be like limited to the one kind of race, because that fits order very well, in comparison to demons who have just like a mishmash of everything, which kind of coincides well with chaos. I'm just wondering, again, like what kind of connection to have between the archangels and the angels and the devils and the demons, just in terms of whether or not like the archangels are like technically the same species of the angels, and since they are more like an order of good within order, I'm gonna lean to saying they probably are like the same kind of generic angel type, just with more wings for now. It's more so the difference between demons and devils that really interests me in this case, because while I'm not opposed to making like an original race for all of these demons slash devils, it's basically going to be like 80 races alone. And even outside of that, I feel I need to have some kind of distinction between the devils and demons to kind of separate them a bit more as well. Just in particular, like in terms of like how they're going to kind of integrate within the world, because I said before, I kind of like the idea of some kind of like physical embodiment of the world representing what the devils are doing. Like basically luring mortals into sin and making contracts to steal their souls if they kind of cave. It just feels very demonic to me. But will the devils be doing that alone, or do they have some kind of leverage over demons to help them kind of do that? Now, I'm probably not gonna bother scrolling through much of the rest of this list of other demons I've got over, mostly because again of just how many there are, and I personally wouldn't consider all of them to be demons anyway, because like we've got the Gorgons from Greek mythology on there, basically Medusa, and well, that's all well and good and interesting. I personally don't really interpret them as being demons from my perspective. Now, apart from that, we do have like the Lemia, which are interesting, like Lilim and Lilith, which we could do something with somewhere. But yeah, it's just mostly kind of unique, standalone, special demons rather than some kind of like demonic race. I might whack the Oni down here, just in reference to like Japanese folklore, but I believe the Oni themselves are pretty expansive too. Same with the Rakshasa from kind of Hindu mythos. But we might save those more for like the Eastern continent kind of stuff as well, but anyway. The other question is where, why, and how kind of many of these places within the world do we want to have these devils and demons spread? Because right now I'm kind of thinking we can have like devils in central continent, Rakshasa in eastern continent, demons everywhere else, or something. Because we do kind of want to fit certain cultural aesthetics in terms of utilizing these devils and demons in whatever way we kind of do so. Now what else do we have? Good old Succubi, we've already got Shinigami. the death gods. Do we want to have some kind of Shinigami slash Soul Reaper slash the personification of death? It's another question we'll have to answer at some point, because that'll tie in pretty heavily with the undead system we end up utilizing. Now, there are a couple other quick resources I can take a quick look at. So there's like one for demonology. Let's see, what would that one involve? The demonology one also has a bit of a characterization of a few things. Doesn't look like it kind of has what I want here either. It goes into the Dijin a bit more, but I don't really see Dijin or Jin, genies, whatever, as anything to do with this too. Speaking of this, we gotta think about like the demon slash angel power systems a bit more, because one of the really beloved kind of class archetype is basically the demon hunter, like in Diablo or Warcraft, and they basically get like the powers of demons to take demons down specifically. So I want to think a bit about how I want to deal with those as we kind of expand on this. And same with like the deal with devil as well. So famously it is more devils than demons that are generally like made pact with. I'm imagining some kind of like blood pact system with devils for contracts. Let's see. I also have a little list here for demons in fictional works, which is probably going to be even bigger than the regular list. But one of the problems with this list is it's again more so like named demons than demon races, but I think that's fine for now. So, next what I'm going to do is look up what kinds of undead races slash species are there, or a classification of undead. Let's see if we get anything for that. So, I've got a couple resources here. So we've got like physical corpses and incorporeal spirits. This is pretty good. So let me bring up a new note there, and we'll say, what do we have? So the Draugr for sure, I know I'm going to do something with in like the northern kind of continent. So we also have like Dhampir, vampires, ghouls, revenants, zombies. Liches. Liches are a big classic we gotta do something with somewhere. Mummies. Skeletons. Whites. I think those are mostly the big ones there. Then we also have like the spiritual ones such as the Banshees. Dullahan, I don't know if I consider Dullahan to be spiritual personally. Ghosts, phantoms, specters. Let's see. Horseman kind of ties into dual hand, let's be real. What else do we have? We have a lot from like other cultures that I'm less familiar with as well. But I would be open to learning about them. And then race. Cool. So there's plenty kind of there. I'm just going to go ahead and get this Wikipedia link pasted at the bottom there, because we may come back to this as a reference throughout parts. Because I think this whole kind of like undead, demonic, angelic underworld system, they're all going to tie in pretty heavily with each other. Which means this is going to play like a influence across all continents. So I can't really finalize on determining any kind of overall individual facet for any of this stuff right now, but I do kind of need to start thinking about it for as we continue to flesh out these worlds and areas, because the problem with like having multiple underworlds, multiple kinds of undeads, and multiple like demonic systems, if we are going to end up going kind of towards that route, it could create some complications and confusions depending on how we implement them or how we utilize them. But right now, one of the ideas I really love the idea of is just having some kind of mega dungeon of demons and demonic creatures. And I said before, I kind of want to use the Lazakiya Solomon's 72 demon archetypes for that, basically coming up with like a bit of a realm for each of them. And I also love like some form of linearity in terms of like power scaling and things like that. And basically the kind of tropes that really do that well, like the tower structures or like the dungeon structures, like going into a tower and climbing like the 100 floors and taking down like the puzzles slash monsters slash traps and boss of each floor to get rewarded. And another archetype that kind of utilizes that well is like the pit system, or like dungeon pit system, because right now, I mean, Babylon itself is famous for the Tower of Babel, for instance, and basically the jealousy of God and all that. And I do imagine like Babylon being pretty tied in with this demonic slash angel system. So I like to imagine maybe Tower of Babel, is it here, or some kind of dungeon pit. I like to imagine this is like a big adventure city. The city of sin. I really like the idea of calling it that. I mean, I know that's kind of been done before in various works as well as in real life, but there's just so much you can really do with it. Like, this is just a place run by the rich. It is a city of sin, a city of lust, a city of greed. This is where people come to escape like the rules and laws of the outside world. It is at the same time anarchy, but at the same time it is also not. So there are designated locations where specific sins are allowed, although performing those acts outside of those establishments is frowned upon. And basically what I'm imagining here is, we said before, like the casino equals greed, the brothel equal lust, buffet equal gluttony, the kind of inn, whatever, where you go to sleep equals like sloth. But what if the city itself is pride. Because, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't a city pride itself on this? And pride is always, like, often seen as, like, the number one kind of thing. And pride is a very, like, political, charismatic kind of thing, too. So I'm imagining if, like, the circles of hell, the establishments within the city, if the city itself is, kind of like the aspect of pride, then the leader of the city is going to be like the top devil within these circles. So yeah, rather than having like all of these kinds of people elsewhere, yeah, I'm imagining the devils themselves are in charge of the city, and they are protecting, like, or protecting might not be the right word, and that's where there's going to be like the big giant 72 floor pit of demons. And also the demons themselves maybe are like trying to climb up to scramble out to kind of enter the real world, and the devils are basically making a business out of that. I'd kind of have to think a little bit about the law as to like whether or not these devils themselves come from the pit or whatever else. I mentioned briefly before, like, I like the idea of the pride guys being fallen angels. But what if all of the devils themselves are fallen angels? And that kind of gives me a bit more room to work in terms of how, like, the devils and demons operate. So all devils equal fallen angels, and that really ties in pretty well in so many ways, because I mean, when you think of like succubi and incubi, like I mentioned before, you generally think of them as demons more than devils, at least in my opinion. That is a thing. And yeah, no. I think fallen angels themselves being representations of these sins are basically not really all that different than mortals. And I did love the idea of these devils being a more humanoid shape, which again, fallen angels themselves are perfect for, and I did want I wanted to do something with fallen angels as well, so that kind of works out pretty well for me there. So I think I'm pretty happy with that for now. Yeah, in that case, I still need to kind of think about like what kind of business would envy represent. Let's look that up. What kind of business / venture would envy represent? We'll kind of see what that says. And while we're getting some results for that, I'll kind of briefly look at some of my undead notes, because we're also going to have like Death Knights and Shadows is like a form of undead. Death Knights are a classic, like we've got to do something with them. Aside from that, okay, black markets sound interesting, or like luxury goods, some kind of market could be interesting. Or like black market, information network, like selling secrets and everything everywhere. Sounds pretty cool. And I might also think about that same kind of thing for sloth, because I don't really know if like an inn is right for that. But like an arena for Raft, like a fight club, the city itself being Pride, and then like the brothel and the casino are perfect, but we also might think about gluttony. Gluttony as well. Okay. Let's see. What else do we have here? So sloth could be like some kind of resort. Or hotel. And we can kind of imagine it as like the city itself being... Maybe it isn't a city, maybe it's more of like a resort in and of itself. Can kind of think about it in that vibe. And gluttony itself, yeah, they could basically represent like 7 facets of this estate. So again, gourmet buffet restaurants is like the #1 thing. All the food and drink you could want there. That kind of makes sense. Yeah, no, that might be good for now. Alrighty. I am pretty happy with that. So, in that case, to be able to incorporate this properly, we also need to think about the Tower of Babel. We'll kind of see what results we get there for that as well. Because that's going to tie more into how the devils came to me. So maybe the devils, or the fallen angels rather, came from the tower itself, fell into the mortal realm of sin, and now they're kind of like interfering in these angels' war against the demons. Alright, so God saw the city and the tower was concerned. Their unified effort could lead them to achieve anything. I confused the language. Okay. Alright, and I need to think about like, since we are designing like Babylon basically in this world, it's often associated with a few other things like the hanging gardens too. So I gotta think about those. So Babel, Tower of Babel, hanging gardens of Babylon. And this does kind of work out well, because this is like the area where I wanted to concentrate a lot of this stuff, because the other parts of the world are going to take advantage of other cultures, and I didn't really want to have other systems intruding there. Well, I do like the idea of having some kind of like united universal threat that is kind of everywhere. That's more so going to be the Eldritch kind of stuff. Deep, dark, scary creatures from the beyond. Now. What shall we do here? why are these demons, devils, and angels fighting? So, demons of chaos inside the pit live for no reason other than chaos. Each demon is a unique demonic race with its own powers, purpose, identity that wishes to wreak carnage and havoc in its own way, however it can. Angels are beings of order who oversee the world and see it as their duty to prevent the demons from causing chaos. Devil/fallen angels are great angelic beings of power who fell to the vices of mortal/demonic temptation. And remain in the world between worlds. They have created a bastion of a city around the abyss where the demons originate from in order to slow the angels' invasion / protect the demons, encourage more mortals to fall to the pleasures of sin. Cool. Now, to that end, demons, fallen angels, and angels all use mortals as their instruments in their fight. So we'll say angels contract with mortals to loan them their powers to venture into the abyss and wipe the demons out. Demons contracts with humans to let's see, we kind of need to think about the difference between the angels, the demons, and the devils a bit more here. So the angels will definitely like try to keep order, learning the powers, and they definitely want to get the demons out. What do they want to do with the devils? Why have the devils been able to maintain this city? What is the priority of the angels? The priority of the angels is order. And I would say, ironically, the fallen angels building this city around the abyss is not only like an act of like chaos in terms of like rebellion, but it is also to an extent an act of order, as I think it would technically be like slowing the rate of which like demons come out of this pit, but maybe the reason for that is the devils have come to like some kind of agreement with them. And I would say that agreement in question is probably to the detriment of the angels. But with that said, I imagine like the angels see the plentiful nature in comparison to the small number of fallen angels as a larger, and they're probably more so concerned about taking out the demons first and dealing with the fallen angels later. So let's let's say that the devils, rather than like fucking with the mortals, their goal is to cause more angels to fall. Demons contract with humans to cause chaos. The surface. Slash. Now, Tower of Babel, I imagine that we can do like some kind of angelic style dungeon in reverse to the kind of demonic pit. So, demons contract with humans to cause chaos on the surface. Slash invade the Tower of Babel to quell the angels. The devils just want like more angels to fall to bolster their numbers and sink the world into a world of pleasure and sin. Cool. I think that's a pretty reasonable basis to determine things there. Alrighty. Now, I kind of need to think a bit about power systems for some of these guys. Basically, with how I ended up structuring this, so if they're all going to be fallen angels, the circles, quote unquote, of hell become a little bit more intangible, especially if it's like a city on the surface itself. So if we do have the circles of hell, maybe we call them the circles of the abyss, and we'll say that there's 9 circles of the abyss, which each house 8 types of demon. And we can use the circles of hell more in inspiration in tandem with the abyss of these demons, basically. So each one will have like 8 types of demons. They're basically going to be like power scaling blocks. So say like the first kind of circle has a level, is for like level 1s, and the like final circle is for like level 9s, which is basically intended to be the max level anyway. So this kind of works out really well in terms of the system I kind of wanted to make and how I wanted to design it and everything else. So that's pretty good there. Now, outside of that, what else do we kind of want to do there? So I can bring up a list of Solomon's demons at some point. I believe I already have a list written down somewhere. And I think I also took the liberty of getting like a symbol that kind of represents them all too. I don't remember if I have those saved anywhere, but we could do something pretty creative with them in that sense. But I think they're going to be like a lot more to tackle on at some point. So I think for now, instead, let's think about these sins and virtues and what they represent. So I'm going to go ahead and briefly bring up additional bit of research here. So what are the 7 virtues that counterpart the 7 sins? And I believe these sources are a bit more mixed in how these ones specifically are handled. So I know there's like chastity is a big one to like go against greed. Lust. Sorry, so lust, chastity. Then we have temperance for gluttony, charity for greed. I'll swap these up properly when I finish. Diligence for sloth, kindness for envy, patience for wrath, and humility for pride. That sounds like a pretty good list to me. So we'll put chastity like that. Cool. Alright, so yeah, let's think about how we could basically correspond this to some form of power system. I've mentioned before I like the idea of some kind of emotion-based power system. Power that comes from emotion and or emotions that are affected by powers. But we also need to consider the contract system for how this works. So I imagine the demons themselves are races with unique properties / powers. Contracting with a demon gives the player character power over the demon's powers / the ability to summon the demon, a bond of communion, the demon that allows communication, telepathy, whatever. Basically having the ability as to basically have the demon as a familiar. So allows the demon to possess the PC, gives the PC some demonic powers / demonic appearance themselves. And I do love that on its own. So it's kind of similar to the elemental system in a way. Maybe we'll also kind of give the elementals some kind of communion or bond or whatever else, because basically like a player having a bond with their own unique demon sounds pretty cool to me. And there's basically a few kind of interesting things we can do with that system, because, well, demons' goal in a sense can be seen to like invade Babel and cause chaos. I imagine they also have their own like internal power structures, which might lead to infighting among them to determine like who's the strongest, who's the most powerful, who's in charge, etc., etc. So we can expand on that at some stage. Oops. So we will think on that a little bit. But I think, yeah, as kind of noted, we're mostly going to focus on the demons more later. But in the meantime, since we're treating the devils as more like fallen angels now, how would we go in terms of like contracts with them? Because I think we're more leaning into the demon contract than devil contract vibe at this time. And I really like the idea of tying in these sins and virtues in with the power system somehow, but I don't really know how we would utilize it. Maybe this is like a bit of a paladin / warlock system. Maybe one who has made a contract with an angel / fallen angel / devil. We'll finalize fallen angel or devil at a later point. they become more powerful by practicing their virtue/sins. So, a paladin who has contracted with an angel makes a vow of chastity or whatever else. If they break this pact, they fall, and instead of gaining powers from chastity, they gain powers from lust. And I think we'd kind of want to have some kind of influence for power system there. So let's say, well, first question is, would players make contract with named demons or lesser demons? I kind of like the idea of players make contracts with lesser demons, and if they have the opportunity to slay the overlord demon of their demonic contract partner, then their demonic contract partner becomes the replacement great demon. So that sounds like a lot of fun, I'm not gonna lie. Alternatively, yeah, so I'm thinking more so maybe players make contracts with archangels/devils directly. This is mostly because I don't really imagine the Angels of Order would really want to like kill their own overlords. That would be going against Order. Same with the Devils or Fallen Angels. They're probably going to be like the fewest in number, so they probably don't really want to do anything against their own kind. They're more so pitted up against each other a little bit there. Now, with that said, we can say that maybe there only are like 7 angels who have fallen at the beginning of the story or whatever, and they're the ones who kind of like want to tie others into falling to kind of like bolster their own ranks a little bit. And I'm just thinking here, maybe making contracts with Angels or Fallen Angels grants one an angelic, fallen angelic Demir. So maybe they get like the cool angel wings from that. Similar to how like a player making a contract with a demon might get like the bat wings if they make a contract with a demon that has those kinds of features. Okay. Now, a little bit more we can kind of do with that. So we've noted a paladin who has contract with an angel makes a vow of chastity. If they break this pact, they fall. Instead of gaining powers from chastity, they gain powers from lust. So basically, they break their oath with the archangel, and a new pact with opposing powers is granted by the fallen angel correspondent. But I think a fallen angel contractor who refuses to partake in sin and makes a vow of X breaks their pact with the fallen angel and instead makes a vow with the respective archangel. Cool. So that's all well and good, but that's basically going to be how like they become stronger. So I'm not necessarily thinking at this stage that this will be the emotion power system. I think that I want that to be a more mortal system, if that makes sense. But I think for now, we're kind of going along the right vibes for that there. So I kind of need to think a bit more about like what powers they would have in that case. If we have, again, these guys being more fallen angels and angels themselves, I do imagine it kind of makes a bit more sense to have some of those other powers you mentioned earlier, like skinwalkers for envy. The problem with envy will be like, I kind of want the powers to be mirrored, if that makes a lot of sense. So the opposite of a shape changer is going to be someone who essentially doesn't change at all. So I don't really want to do that in this case. I do still like the idea of tying in the kind of sins or whatnot in with the power system somehow. But I'm a little short on ideas for the time being. Aside from that, let's think a little bit else of maybe how these kind of tie in with like the Lord of Light that we're kind of currently calling it. Because I've mentioned before, I kind of want like these angels and stuff to be separate from this this foreign, overbearing, overseeing, kind of all-knowing God, and basically be their own people doing their own thing. And I think as things are, they've kind of done that pretty well. And I especially want their power system to be separated from the power system of the light, essentially. But yeah, no, I think that's pretty good for now. And I guess I kind of need to think a bit more about like the kind of undead ties we were mentioning before, because we've kind of like gone back and forth between discussing a few different concepts for how undead may be influenced by some of these systems. So, but basically, I think with how we've done it, undead become less relevant to this system now. Unless we do want to like go back into like tying in souls back into this rehashment. So how would that work in that case? So the initial kind of theory was like angels reclaim souls when people die. If they manage to reclaim them, then they kind of become an angel and have their ranks bolstered. So maybe if Angel Contractor dies without breaking contracts, they become an angel and bolster the ranks of the Tower of Babel, whatever. If Fallen Angel Contractor dies without breaking contract, they become a Fallen Angel and bolster the ranks of the city of Babylon / Sin. Now, demons are going to be the more complex one. What would happen in the case that a demon contractor dies. Because with the case of the angels and the fallen angels, you're more so making a contract with like the big ones in charge of their respective domains or factions or whatever. In comparison, the demon contractors are also making contracts with like these smaller demons. So I don't imagine that a demonic contractor would become a demon if they die in this case. I imagine that power, basically, yeah, it's the selling the soul thing. The demon gets to eat your soul. So, if demon contractor dies, regardless of contracts, the demon eats the fallen one's soul. The demon becomes more powerful in the process. The leftover corpse becomes an undead. Alrighty. We can also think a bit more about like what kind of undead it might want to be. Let's think about that a little bit more, because part of the thought process I had before was like, in terms of like the reclamation of souls. Actually, yeah, I think speaking of the reclamation of souls, let's kind of revisit the important concept for the angels, because like outside of contracts as well, I think the idea was that the angels might be like trying to reclaim the souls of people to prevent demons from eating them to become stronger, basically. So if we go with that, and that kind of changes how we need to do this a little bit. Mostly because what's going to be like the difference between someone who had made a contract with an angel and died and someone who didn't make a contract with an angel and died. And if someone did make a contract with an angel, would their corpse still become an undead afterwards? And vice versa, would the fallen angels kind of work the same? So the corpse of the fallen, once the soul has parted, will not become undead. And the corpse of the fallen, once the soul has parted, will become some form of undead, because even though the soul has left the body, I'd say maybe there's some kind of like difference in how the soul is taken or reclaimed, which results in like something happening, or maybe the bodies themselves become angels or fallen angels. Because these guys technically, with how we're doing this, are more so on the physical realm. The course of the fallen angel, the course of the fallen becomes an angel itself with the soul intact. Cool, so it's basically like changing one's race. And I like the idea of like a difference in soul here, like the kind of the angels kind of fallen. They kind of retain their soul, retain all of their personality, but maybe the fallen angels kind of like have their personality shattered a little bit. And that kind of gives a bit of an opportunity for a player to basically change their personality if they feel like changing it. I guess the same could be said for the angels as well, but I think, again, since the angels are a bit more about order, they'd probably want to be a bit more proper. Now, demons will eat the soul, leave the corpse. Actually, some demons may eat the corpse too. This becomes the difference between what kind of undead they may become. Cool. But yeah, so I want to keep most of this demonic angelic bullshit going on within the vicinity of this city of Babel that we're kind of constructing here. Again, that's mostly because if we kind of allow them free reign to get everywhere, then they will be everywhere. So I like the idea of them like having some form of like agency throughout the continent itself, but hopefully not like too far into other continents. I think it'll be more up to the DM's discretion, if anything, based also on like how the player parties actually might be able to want to play their characters, or what kind of story that they all want to play together, or whatever more so. Again, but I'm also just like coming up with the concept of building blocks for people to essentially do whatever the fuck they want with. Yeah, so no, that sounds like one good method of undead generation, and that kind of gives some kind of reasoning as to why different kinds of undead may spawn in different kinds of locations. And manner of death, especially with like a soul being taken, is definitely going to influence that. In the case of someone dying where the soul itself like wasn't taken, but the body was destroyed, I imagine that's when like spiritual undead come into play, and I imagine like a body where the soul has been taken becomes like lesser forms of undead, like zombies and skeletons, and then bodies where the soul has kind of remained. Those are probably going to be more so the types that come back as more advanced forms of undead. And I like the idea of players being able to come back as undead based on their circumstances. So, depending on how one dies, affects whether or not they go to an underworld, or which underworld they go to. And let's see what else. As well as what form or type of undead they may or may not become. A player who doesn't go to an underworld, doesn't escape the underworld, may come back as an undead. The difference in manner of death, as well as one's level/capability in life, affects what form or type of undead one may come back as. I love that idea because I said it before, like, but resurrection magic is bullshit. Like, it takes away stakes. It takes away like the ultimate consequence of losing your character, essentially. And what I really like the idea of is basically, yeah, like being able to come back in different means if you are attached to your character. Like, it gives you a chance to change your story or your playstyle or your personality without essentially having to get attached to a new character. It's basically the continuation of a secondary arc as the same person to an extent. Because that's a big thing about why players don't like dying if they're attached to their characters, because they love their character. They don't want to play as a different character. They've been playing as these characters for years and have like established these close bonds, not only with their character as a person, but with their other party members and their player characters and players as well. And yeah, no, that just sounds like a really nice time to me personally. But yeah, we'll kind of continue to flesh that out in different ways as we do continue developing these underworlds and these different kind of like undead systems. But yeah, I guess in this case, if someone died in the vicinity of these angels or demons or fallen angels, what kind of power play would there be for these souls? So, if a non-contractor falls within the lands of the angels, demons, fallen angels, what happens? Do they get approached by any or all of the factions as a play for their soul? Do they fight over them? Does the player make a choice? We can kind of give the framework for a few different options to really happen there. But yeah, no, I kind of like the DM or the players themselves being able to decide, because at the end of the day, I don't think a DM should be making that decision for a player for them, unless it is some kind of like fights between them. Is there a fight for the soul between the factions? And would the fallen angels make much of a play at all? All questions kind of worth thinking about there. But yeah, no, I kind of like that. So devils, angels, demons, angels, and fallen angels. We're kind of gonna put all this information in a single category for these guys here. So I think we've kind of expanded on that pretty well there. There we go. Alrighty. So now let's bring this all the way back up to where we have the rest of our information. Because we are going to get rid of those, just whack these guys instead. Yeah, that's a good way of doing it. Alrighty. No, I like that. So the initial concept was, again, to have these guys be a bit more all over the world, but now if we do want to like take advantage of other kind of supernatural races like the Rakshasa, Rakshasa, how you pronounce it, which I would really like to do. Took a lot of inspiration from a manhwa slash webtoon series called Kubera for that, just because I really loved how they had like these different races of these Hindu mythos kind of demology aspects, like these snake slash serpent guys and the kind of more like winged avian guys. It had a pretty cool thing going on there, and I really want to take a lot of inspiration from it as well. And it gives us a bit of an excuse to have different kinds of like supernatural race systems with different kind of like power aspects in these other cultures too, rather than just having like demons and angels like everywhere, which is nice. And that kind of gives me a bit more luxury in terms of how we're developing this world and treating the undead in different ways in different areas too. Because now, rather than thinking of the undead as a whole, I can now think more specifically about how to treat the undead within the confines of this central continent, depending on these other powers that kind of already exist there, like the forces of good or evil, or angels or demons or whatever, and how that kind of impacts things. That'll make fleshing out like the kind of Greek island mythos of the underworld a bit easier to flesh out too. Cool. Now, let's continue looking at the rest of these. So we've got all of our human tribes up there. I'm going to think a bit more about some of these monstrous ones. So we've done a bit with the elves, we've done a bit with the dwarves. What else do we want to do? I think like dragons and titans or whatever are going to be some of the last ones we kind of work on. What am I in the mood for? I kind of feel like doing something a little bit walky, but I'm not really sure how I might execute that yet. So I might get rid of this little one here for Godly Deities for now, just because that might be more so based on the individual cultures of any of these like people or creatures. So we've also got the Tarasques, the Elder Beings. So these ones are going to be a bit more funky. So I think I'll put the more crazy stuff further down. Especially they're not really going to be like fully physically in any of these areas, like most of these other races are going to be, if that makes sense. Cool. Alright. So these funky ones can come down. So I wouldn't mind working on like the Tarrasque, because it's going to be like some kind of legendary creature in this area that we could kind of like play on a bit more, but I think it might be better to flesh out the individual areas around that stuff for now. But you know what we could do? We'd actually kind of just like continue a few things here and think more about the City of Sin itself, which I do like the idea of. So, City of Sin, we'll call it Babylon for now. I mean, we're going to rename all this stuff at some point. The City of Sin, Babylon, is famous for its infamy. Being a haven of mortal uh, pleasure. It is the place to go within not only the central continent, but also the world view at large to find what you are looking for. The city is famed not only for its casino and brothel, but also for its link to the demonic abyss, as well as the Tower of Babel, which stand within its grounds. So you've got to think a bit more about like the pit itself and how that kind of like pit might come into play with the tower as well, like just how they're geographically like structured and centered and whatnot. In addition to the above, City of Sin is known for / treated as a gourmet resort with all-you-can-eat buffets and rooms fit for a king where you can sleep for days. Outside of those, it also has the infamous fight arena, where much of the gambling done within the casino has its bets placed on. Then we also have finally, the city itself is home to the world's greatest black market, where anything can be bought, anything can be sold, including all kinds of tacit information. Alrighty. I love that, and that kind of brings into play a little bit more about some kind of like factions that kind of might appear a little bit more around the world, because we've kind of mentioned before how we might have like the Knight Academy and the Adventurers Guild, but we're also going to have like guilds outside of that. And I like the idea of like a few different guilds kind of like pertaining to different causes or classes. Like I remember I wanted some kind of like Tailor's Guild, which might also potentially like develop as an Assassin's Guild, or a Blacksmith's Guild who kind of like doubles as arms traders. And a lot of those guilds revolve around some form of occupation, whether it be of like labor or arts and crafts or gathering, anything kind of like that. And just thinking about it a little more, like I'm imagining the City of Sin could either be seen as like a haven for these guilds to operate the headquarters out of, or maybe even some kind of adverse place where none of them really want to touch. But I think just for the prospect of like the City of Sin itself, apart from like all the glorious fun there is to be held there, like the adventurer's duty of like wiping out these demons probably might attract a lot of adventurous types there. So maybe that is where like the adventurers HQ at the very least is founded, because I do like the idea of like having a bit of a basis for each of them, and like each kind of different city or nation or whatever. Um, but yeah, they've all got to have a main premise somewhere, and I'm kind of glad I brought up some of the points I just made about like the Tailors Guild serving as an Assassin's Guild, for example, because that kind of makes me think a bit more back to the Persian kind of empire that we had been working on, like the kind of deserty assassin folk, because basically it didn't really feel like I had a lot going for them at the time we visited them. But what if that's where kind of like the Tailors Guild, for example, was founded? Maybe they have their own civilization of like tailors, like fine weaves of like very high quality silks and cloth and whatnot, and yeah, maybe they kind of get out and about a bit more there, because I think the problem with how I've been designing things so far is that while it has been good to like focus on the smaller individual parts within each of these nations and kind of building up from there, it's also made it a bit more difficult to really think about the exchange of cultures and people throughout these different borders, which would inevitably happen in like a realistic kind of world environment, because everything's kind of felt a bit separated right now. But by having these guilds for like professions, like even outside of the cultures themselves, or like outside of the respective cultures, like power systems and national identity, like wizards and knights, it does allow us to think a lot more about like how we can kind of implement them where, and yeah, it just gives like more identity and purpose to each of them. So I think what we might do next is think a little bit about exactly that, like what kinds of guilds will we have in what areas. So I'm going to go into my background notes here, because I do have a pretty convenient list of like different guild types like stashed somewhere. So I think that might be a good place to expand on. So for now, I'm just going to whack it in here, because this does feel like a fitting place where we might have this kind of stuff. Although no, maybe I'll put them out here for now, and if need be, we can kind of go back to the Babylonian area later, and that might be where we put a lot of them anyway. So, let's see. Guild types. So what kind of guilds do we want to have? Some kind of like bakers guild. Let's maybe do bullet points. We're also gonna have like some kind of like carpenters, roofers, plasterers, cellarers / plumbers. Coopers, so like kegs, barrels, casks, farmers / agriculture. And we kind of want to think, as we're kind of jotting these down, about what kinds of national environments or identities would we find these guys really having a stronger purpose with. Like the dung sweepers, for instance. So, salters, packers, joiners, fishmongers, butchers. chandlers and lamplighters. Us. Braziers. Spectacle makers. That's going to be a big one. Stone cutters, masons, potters, and tile makers, all that kind of stuff. Launderers even. Basket makers. And wicket weavers. Street labourers. Vintners, distillers, and brewers. I'm spelling some of these words horribly. Inn and tavern. Proprietors. And then mages and protectors. Cool. So now, off the bat, I can think of like plenty more guilds I'm gonna want to kind of incorporate. What kind of profession slash artisan guilds would exist in a middle-age fantasy society? Cool. And off the bat, I'm thinking of like hunters, tailors, leather makers, mineral gatherers, miners, blacksmiths, herbalists, alchemists. We kind of already thought about a little bit, but I think that's a bit more like profession-y than classy with some ties to magic. So we've got to be a bit careful of how we want to treat them. Because treating an alchemist like a playable class is a bit similar to treating an artificer or a blacksmith as a class, in all honesty. So we've got to think about how to kind of tie that in. Let's see, what else do we have? So blacksmith we have, mason, yep, tailors, alchemists, enchanters, fletchers, lumberjacks potentially. Jewelers. I want to like do something interesting with jewelry. That sounds like it could be a lot of fun. Shipbuilders as well. Gliders, not sure if we'll do anything there. Mercenaries, adventurers. Adventurers is going to be like the big one. Scroll slash parchment makers. And I do love the idea of having some kind of like spell scrolls too. Glass makers we kind of got, weavers we've kind of got. Let me go up to some of those. Because we can, again, there's going to be an overlap with some of these industries that we can kind of tie into play a bit. So we've got architects as well. These tamers, so from like hunters and whatnot. Let's see, so enchanters are probably going to be like magical item crafters. Apothecaries. We've got to think about how that ties into play with alchemists. We got the cooks. Let's see what else kind of like results we can get. So we've also already thought about assassins, so we've established that martial classes aren't really going to be a thing. Not that they don't exist, but in this world, again, it's going to be more like a profession than a class archetype, if that makes sense. Okay, what else do we have showing up here? Scribes. Furrowers. Sounds a bit sus, but I get what it is. Monks, artisans. Some more general stuff here. Seamstress kind of falls under tailor. Leather worker, did I put that down? Yeah. Leather maker. Let's replace that with leather worker. Bards, sculptors. We've done like musicians. What about dance? Or the arts? So we've got one for like music, we've got one for singing, we've got one for dance. Painting. Inventors, we can do a slash for tinkerers. I don't really know if I need one for beekeepers, but hey, we can think about a bee society somewhere. Cartographers, that's a big one. Fortune tellers. Now I don't mind the idea of some kind of tarot system. Die makers, candle makers. I feel like candle makers falls a bit under one of the other ones. Herders slash livestock. We've kind of got a Jorah's Guild already. Cool. Now I'm gonna search up a few more results a couple more times, just to see if we get anything different. So watchmakers, I love the idea of. Maybe even like slash clockmakers. I don't know like how in depth we might want to go with that. Let's see. Librarians could be a big one. Porters is another good one. Horologist is kind of what I was looking for there. Okay. Astronomers. Could do something fancy with. Let me see. Criminal Guild. That could be something. Now look up one last batch, and we'll see if we kind of get curators slash museums. It's probably kind of what I was thinking of earlier. But I think that's pretty good. So one final one I'm thinking we'll definitely need is like a crematorium or something to handle like the fallen. But yeah, that is quite a list. So let's change those to numbers. So we got like 67. That's pretty solid because keep in mind we're not going to be limiting these guilds to the central continent. I'm thinking of them in terms of more like an international operation. I do like having some room for discovery in terms of player agency. So I don't want everything to be everywhere, but at the very least, like one big city on each continent. I kind of want to have like a base of operations for like each of these guilds, which comes with an origin for from somewhere. So even if we have like a city per like national kingdom within each nation within the central continent, not every guild may be in every city, but maybe the city of Sin does have like one of each guild kind of stationed there. So let's do this. One city on each continent / major civilization area has one branch each guild. Each guild has its own home nation / HQ. And I kind of want to try to avoid having overlaps with some of them, but for instance, I'm really thinking like maybe a lot of the wood and like herbs and apothecary kind of stuff comes from like the druidic / elvish cultures in the forest. And what I like to imagine is the Lumberjacks Guild isn't necessarily like a bunch of guys like chopping down trees in that kind of elvish area, but it's more so the singing of trees or the reclamation of like fallen trees or whatnot. But we could take separate notes for those in a moment. So anything else I kind of want to put on that left-hand side note there. So one city on each continent or major civilization area, like an archipelago separate from the continents with a big city. We'll have a branch of each of these. Each kind of nation or race might have their own contribution. Yeah, no, I think that's pretty settled. But yeah, no, one of the things I might do is basically like comb this list and kind of like review some double ups here and there and kind of just like clean that up a little, but I think for now that might be a good place for me to take a break there. Cool, so I mentioned a little bit prior before that I'm probably going to miss the stream the day after tomorrow, but yeah, should be alright from there. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and yeah, I'm just gonna head off here. Bye bye for now.